We are all trying to outrun a machine. We are working faster, staying later, perfecting the details nobody else cares about. We're grinding because somewhere deep down we believe that if we just work hard enough, optimize enough, achieve enough, we will be valuable. We'll be safe. We will be irreplaceable. So we become machines ourselves, efficient, consistent, perfect. And then we burn out. At 43, at the peak of success, at the moment when you finally made it and your body is screaming that none of it was worth the cost. That was Julian Reeve's wake up call. Now he's asking a completely different question. What if you stop trying to outrun the machine? What if AI isn't a threat to your career, but permission, sleep, an invitation to finally stop doing what machines can do better and start doing what only you can do? Your identity, your creativity, your judgment, the things that make you you, you. Those are irreplaceable. And they are the things that burnout, perfectionism, and corporate culture have been systematically destroying. My guest today is Julian Reeve, keynote speaker, executive coach, former music director at Broadway's Hamilton, and founder of Perfect Equilibrium. He spent years helping high performance reclaim their authenticity, their health, and their sense of self after getting trapped in the achievement machine. Today, we are reframing AI not as a threat, but as a mirror. We are talking about how to use AI to free yourself from perfectionism. And we're exploring what it means to finally become who you actually are instead of who you thought you needed to be. Julian, welcome to the Growth Hacking Culture Podcast. A pleasure.
Ivan, thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Let's jump on a question that I have for a long time in my head. So we are living at moment of mass anxiety about AI is taking my job, replacing skills, making humans irrelevant. But your perspective is completely different. You say AI is actually an opportunity, a wake-up call to reclaim what makes us human. What made you change your thinking about that, about this?
Yeah, so I've been involved with leaders and organizations for many years from a burnout perspective. And the more work I did in that space, the more I kind of really understood that we're at a pivotal moment with AI where people have kind of paused the initial rush of adoption. And they're kind of really starting to ask some serious questions, which I think are really important. I think, the initial drive to AI has been driven by, well, how much more can we produce? And how can we produce at scale, and how can we do it as cheaply as possible? And, as a result, a lot of people are looking to AI for those answers. But I think now this pause offers us a really great opportunity from an organizational standpoint to really get to the roots of what we now consider human value to be, and to restructure our workflows and our organizational kind of longevity from a human up perspective rather than an AI down perspective, which is kind of where I think we've been for a couple of years. And a lot of this was born out of my experience with AI personally. I built a chatbot 3 years ago called the Perfect Equilibrium Personal Assistant, which basically worked alongside me as a coach, helping high achievers achieve success in healthier ways. It was all about how to manage yourself, how to release yourself from work identity to be able to kind of lead a fuller, healthier life. And that experience kind of really drew me into the AI world. And I did a huge amount of research in terms of where we are. And I think now is a huge opportunity, as I said, for organizations and for individuals to build what I'm calling unmistakable identity, which is very connected output and distinctive output that is able to be created, because we're kind of using three core pillars, which you mentioned: identity, creativity, and judgment, to kind of really differentiate in a very new way.
I want to pick on something that is meaningful for me, and it's the fact that you said it 3 years ago. I created my chatbot. 5 years ago, nobody would have said, I have created my chatbot because we were incapable. In any case, for me,
Yeah.
I'm not a coder, but it is incredible that people like us in our early 50s, we take Our hands, we have a little bit of things that we have been dreaming of. And today we are capable of making it happen. This chatbot that you created, my stupid habit tracking app that I vibe coded 1 year, maybe 1 year ago, my 63 years old pal who, I mean, he didn't have anything to do, who could develop at least 6 apps on his
Yeah.
own.
Yeah.
I'm impressed the type of opportunities for us, the old folks, to create because we have what you just said. We have a little bit of creativity in our head. We are not dumb yet. We have this perspective, so we can see things with perspective. What can be really useful and do in purpose? The fact that we are reflecting in our purpose. So, what do we want to do, but at the scale? And suddenly we put our hands in, and it's an app that can help some others. Wow, that's
Absolutely.
incredible, right?
And
The
and
time
and
that
I
we live.
think that's such a great observation, particularly of age, because I think historically, we've been so focused on skill and work from a doing perspective. And, it's only really since the birth of kind of computers that then kind of gave birth to all of this opportunity. AI is the extension of that allows us kind of daily opportunity to explore, to be curious, to find new things, to synthesize in different ways, to create very differentiated output that we'd never had the opportunity to do that before. But I think these big companies right now, it's all about fear. It's all about, well, if we tell them that it's all going to be so bad, then, it makes our product look better and look more important. So therefore, the perception is, well, it has to be more expensive, more people will invest in it, etc., etc. So my advice to people is forget the fear and simply come back to, basic human values and stay curious about how you can work alongside a machine. Mo Gaudat is a chief engineer, or was at Google, who's doing some incredible work in this space. Kind of, he's kind of promoting the fact that AI allows us an extra 400 to 600 IQ points alongside our brain already. Now, that is incredible from a statistical standpoint. But what I've found through my work is because of how machines think, it's allowed me to be uniquely human in my prompting, which has allowed an evolution at a pace that I've been really pleased with, but also a scale that I've been really pleased with in terms of getting this work out. So, yeah, I think it's, if we can stay curious, if we can stay excited, I think now's a really exciting time.
But I have the impression that if we want to stay human, and we relate it to this point about burnout. So if we think about burnout, and I have gone through this journey of recovering from burnout, and when I think specifically about me, I wouldn't say that it was because I was overworking. I was working something that it was a natural pattern in an American company back in my corporate days. There was other things. The fact that I didn't feel part of the team, not feeling belonging because I consider that some of them were assholes. And what's the point? I'm not like them. Well, this is what I thought. I was hating the values of my company. I thought that I didn't have purpose or meaning on what I was doing, spending days and days creating sharp PowerPoint presentations to impress some people who didn't give a
Mm-hmm.
shit about what I was doing and they didn't even know who I was exactly, other than my title. So can AI help us beyond making time for ourselves to help us find this purpose, belonging, things that we are missing? And burnout doesn't come just from one way of overworking. It comes from other ways.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dr. Christina Maslach is like the world leader in burnout research. I've learned a
Yeah.
huge amount from her. And she's worked out that we burn out for 6 reasons. Work overload does what it says on the tin. We're just overloaded with work. Lack of control. We don't have autonomy in our work, be it, what systems we're allowed to use, or we're being micromanaged, that type of stuff. Reward and recognition. We're not rewarded or recognized either enough or in ways that actually make a difference to us as humans. Feelings of unfairness, where we feel like we're being talked to differently or treated differently from other professionals that work alongside
Yeah.
us. Breakdown of community. And it feels like you kind of hinted at that of your own experience where, well, I'm not surrounded by people who I want to be surrounded by. And, That also speaks to if you're working remotely or in silos, you're cut off from everybody else. You haven't got that human connection. That's a big leader of burnout. And the other one, which you talked about, was conflict of values, where the personal value system isn't congruent with an organization's. And so I think, what I do in my keynote work, which is hugely valuable from an individual standpoint, but also organizational, is that I actually reverse engineer those 6 core areas in the room. So it's effectively diagnostic. So you walk away with a very clear snapshot about, what is actually driving that stress and burnout according to those 6 areas. And I think your point is very, very valid. The thinking that from an individual standpoint, yeah, sure, we understand what the markers are. We've just talked about them. But, we are naturally, as humans, ambitious. We want to work. Those of us who are driven by work, actually, through no fault of their own, and I'll explain why in a minute, actually have a much deeper experience and connection to work than perhaps they realize. And it all comes back to the self-worth theory. So a psychologist called Martin Covington in the mid-70s figured out that we calculate our self-worth based on our performance, right? So if we're good at something and we do it often and we get great results, our self-worth and by proxy self-esteem is really high. But the problem with that is that one of those kind of dimensions is always going to be screwed with. So you might not get enough time to do something, so therefore your self-worth is decreased. Or you might be asked to do something that really challenges your skill level, in which case your self-worth is decreased. And the work that I very much do with high achievers centers around that. And it kind of says, well, we can't necessarily start equating our self-worth fundamentally differently, but we can add a different layer to make sure that we can achieve success in healthier ways. And that layer is actually self-care. And there are 4 kind of key areas of perfect equilibrium: self-care, self-awareness, self-compassion, which is so important, and self-efficacy. The self-compassion element is incredibly important because every single high achiever that I've ever worked with in my entire career has always been incredibly hard on themselves. And their belief is, well, I have to be hard on myself to achieve great things. And when I'm hard on myself, I do achieve great things. And so there is a real fear that they can't strive as hard as they want to, and that they have to keep pushing, that they have to keep, this endless kind of cycle of commitment, irrespective of what that means for the rest of their life, their physical health, their mental health, etc. That's categorically untrue. And I think probably out of the 4 layers that I have within perfect equilibrium, I lean on self-compassion a lot to sort of rewire that thinking so that we can achieve success in healthier ways.
I have the impression that we get inspired, but wrongly, about athletes. So we see athletes like now during the football matches, people who are 90 minutes running from left to right and they're sweating and we know that they are tired and we believe that because of the efforts that they push themselves to go more. But we have also seen only lately athletes breaking, stopping, because they cannot handle any more this pressure to go a little bit more than the last time. Is from there that it comes the fact that our beliefs about what does it take to be at the top, from athletes or from other type of examples?
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely right. And I can definitely kind of connect to this from a personal perspective. I worked for decades in music to get to the very top of my field, and I made it. I got to be the music director of the biggest Broadway show at the time, Hamilton. I worked on the Broadway production for 6 months and then took out the first national tour as the music director. I also ran businesses. I ran alongside that. I created a production company. I founded a talent agency. I had a well-being consultancy. I had all sorts of business opportunities. And until I got Hamilton, it was all about treadmill, metaphorical treadmill, run as fast as possible every day in the hope that all of those things will come together and reach a level of success. And ironically, what happened to me was 3 months into my job on Hamilton, I had, as you said in my bio, a stress-related heart attack. And I was 43 years old. Now, the root cause of that experience was driven by 2 things. workaholism, and perfectionism. And all of it centered around the fundamental belief that if I achieved a certain level, then I was somebody, that I was good enough, that I had something to say. I was able to own a place in the world that I could be proud of. And the irony of my situation is that I achieved that, but I couldn't sustain it because the heart attack, and I had a repetitive strain injury because by that point my body was so locked in the stress response, it couldn't get its way out. So I had to quit performing altogether, which is why I now do the work that I do so that people can learn from my experiences. But I think, the whole thinking that we have to and can only achieve great success linearly is just wrong. And what I always encourage people to think now, and this is to your point and to the question, is that we can achieve success this way, laterally, as well as linearly. And my argument is the result that we produce by thinking this way, laterally, is far more impactful from a human perspective, from a differentiated output perspective, but also from a sustainable perspective. If we prioritize ourselves, even if we take breaks every hour for 5 minutes to breathe, breathing for 30 to 60 seconds regulates our parasympathetic nervous system, which is the thing that unlocks the stress response. So if you're working in very stressful environments and you simply use the breath as a tool, you will decrease stress and therefore reduce the possibility that it will lead to burnout. So that achievement part, thinking, okay, well, how can I achieve every single thing that I'm doing in healthier ways, makes the kind of global daily output, weekly, monthly, yearly, a much more kind of full expression of who we are as humans, which I think is a much better way to lead your life.
Now, the problem that I see, because of personal experience, is we don't make the time to think about ourselves. We don't make the time to map out how much we know about ourselves. We do things because somebody else did it. He has a nice car. I need to have a nice car, or I need that title. I'm competing with the guy who used to be my friend, and now he's just shooting at me every day. We clearly, and this is one of the pillars that you just mentioned before, self-awareness, but we don't make the time, even though sometimes we could be super clever, super intelligent for that specific area. We don't even make 5 minutes every day. We make maybe during the holidays, we think about ourselves during half an hour and that's it. Is that correct, Julian?
Yep. Absolutely. I think the wonderful irony about self-awareness is that 95% of us think that we're self-aware, which is kind of when we know enough about ourselves to be able to move through life in healthier ways. But the actual number is somewhere between 12 and 15%. That's Dr. Tasha Eurich's research for her book Insight. And that book basically changed my life completely in terms of how I think and how I operate and how I coach. Please read it if you haven't. I think you're absolutely right. And it speaks to what I'm calling for in this age of AI. I think the way forward is to create an unmistakable identity that simply can't be ignored. But the core of that unmistakable identity is being intentional with everything that we do. And I think mobile phones then grew to smartphones and, we're on these things all day. We're just walking with our heads down. We're not intentionally moving through life anymore. And I think that when we really apply, not intentionality, because that's a different thing, but when we do things intentionally and we're able to kind of really synthesize how we create, how we work, how we operate generally, then we create sustainability. Because to your point, from a self-awareness standpoint, if we intentionally ask ourselves, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What do I need right now? The need is a really interesting question because it can mean anything from I need more sleep, I need less stress, I need a hug, I need a conversation, I need a relationship, I need a relaxation, I need a break, I need a breathe, I need a pause, 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 I need a p I need more food. I need water, right? Which actually I do in a minute, which is why I'll have a sip. But if we don't ask these questions, then we don't get the answers, and the answers offer opportunities. So coming back to burnout, great example. The beginning is, what am I feeling? The answer is stressed. Opportunity. Okay, so what can I do to feel less stressed? Can I put myself in a different environment? Can I take a break? Can I this, that, and the other? And the more we get answers from questions, the more we get to ask new questions that deliver more answers, which can only benefit us. But we have to be intentional. We have to create chunks of time. A lot of people don't do this because they think, well, I don't have time, right? They go, well, I'm too busy for this. But actually, how easy is it to ask yourself, well, what am I thinking right now? You can do that lining up for groceries. You can do that in the car on the way to work. There are a million different ways to do it. We don't have to sit down and meditate or journal or do all the heavy lifting stuff. It really does come down to curiosity, I think, self-awareness. That's kind of the sort of seed of it.
Coming back to the topic of AI, I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of second brain, and I'm new to that. Second brain, that means replicating a little bit the things that I do, I think, I believe, inside of a tool of AI. Any of the AI tools can manage it. It organizes it. And then you can have a discussion. You can have a challenge yourself. You can challenge your priorities, because I have problems with my priorities, because it's still as important to have my family happy as well as generating income. And I have to balance these two things. It is incredible the level that when it is prepared correctly, this second brain, it can put a little bit of perspective of the where you're wasting your time, where you're not putting the priorities according to what you believe in. Because when we are in the flow of work, we just think energy and we are not thinking about the direction. The north is have a family happy, and you're not making it. And second brain will remember that thing.
Yes,
Crazy,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah, and I love the thinking of second brain, and I think again this comes to the opportunity that we have, and I think what's naturally coming with second brain, whether we introduce it ourselves or whether we're forced to work with AI through our work, is the separation of skill and capability. And I think, what we're seeing is AI is able to kind of take away a lot of the skill element, which some would argue, some continue to argue, is the fun part of our work. I disagree with that. I think the skill element is simply the doing, is the productivity. And the capability is a broader sense. Let me give you an example. Let's say that you've called a plumber to your house because you have a leak in your sink in the kitchen. The plumber walks in and he opens the cupboard door and he goes, yep, I see the leak. I see the leak. I know exactly how to fix it and I can do it in 20 minutes. That is skill, but that's what he was taught at university and he can just walk in and do it. Now, let's say he opens the door and he can't find the leak, or he's thinking, okay, well, the solution to this is way more complicated. I'm going to have to, that kind of plumbing is very old. It needs bringing up to code. I need to do this. I need to do that. That's capability. That's not skill anymore. That's him being creative, thinking in a fundamentally different way. And I think coming back to the second brain suggestion and opportunity that we have is that if we can offset a lot of our productivity to the second brain, it allows us to play and have much more space in capability. And to your point, it frees up more time for everything that creates capability in the first place, which is time with family, time with friends, connection, etc. And so we have this gray area that we are right now scared of that offers I think it's a huge cavernous swimming pool that we have the opportunity to dive in and swim around and explore. Oh, what's over there? And the more we do that and the more we use this second brain, our life gets so full. I can only imagine where we're all going to be in 10, 15 years' time. It's so exciting.
Yes. Now, you were already hinting this capability thingy, and you have created this human capability indicator: identity, creativity, and judgment. Tell you the truth, most of us have never thought about certain elements to be part of the capabilities before. Can you dig a little bit more and explain us what it means, say, identity, creativity, and judgment.
Yeah, so I am strongly advocating that humans and organizations need to create unmistakable identity to move forward. The reason why is that AI is going to fundamentally change the workspace, and those that are able to work, those that are able to thrive in the age of AI, know exactly who they are. So the indicator that you spoke about actually is a download on my website where you can download and it's an assessment diagnostic tool that allows you to calculate roughly where you sit in the three core areas of what I'm calling unmistakable identity, which is identity, creativity, and judgment. Now, each of those three areas have three subdivisions, and they answer your point, which is very valid, that people don't necessarily think of identity being a capability, but I think it's going to become a capability. And here's why. The three core areas of identity are self-awareness, which we've just spoken about. We have to become more self-aware. We have to know who we are. Secondly, adaptability. We have to release ourselves of all this rigid thinking, all or nothing thinking, because when we do, we're able to be agile and move around. And I think that's going to be a core skill moving forward. Thirdly is self-efficacy. We have to have the fundamental belief that who we are as a human allows us to move forward irrespective of what's facing us. So when you put all those three together, it becomes, I think, a core capability that is going to be really important. Creativity isn't about making art or playing a guitar or anything like that. It's about the kind of combination of three things. Curiosity, spoken about it already. We have to remain curious. What is possible? Synthesis, the opportunity to look at two things in very, very different ways and to evaluate what they might mean, how much better we can make them by putting them together. In effect, we're talking about category design. It's what Uber did for the taxi business, what Airbnb did for the hotel industry, is take something that exists, put a slightly different slant on it to create something new. And lastly, within creativity is expression. We have to understand how we express, what makes us authentically light up, because that's part of creating differentiated output. The third pillar is judgment, which starts with evaluation. We have to get good, super good, much better than we are at evaluating the situation. Then comes discernment. We have to know what to do with it, what to prioritize, what is more important than others, etc. And then lastly, lastly is decision making. We have to get really good at making solid decisions at the right time. Now, I think the combination of those things and the intentional synthesis of those things in everyday tasks is going to create output that we haven't really explored or discovered yet. And I think when you put that next to the second brain, or you start from an organizational standpoint, start putting the work that's able to be created from that place next to what AI can do, I think that's going to be incredibly valuable and exciting for what we can all achieve in the future.
I hear you, and I was thinking, this model works perfectly for us, the old folks, because we have perspective. We gain perspective. We had the time to reflect. Would it work as well with a younger Ivan back in my 20s? Would it work? Because I didn't know much. I believe that I knew a lot.
Of course.
And my input is going to be like garbage in.
Yes.
Totally.
Yes. Well, it's a really great question. Thank you for asking it, because you're quite right. I said to my 12-year-old nephew on a recent trip back to the UK when I saw him, I said, you are going to need to know yourself at the age of 20 in the same way that I knew myself at the age of 35 or 40. Because to your point, how can we create differentiated output if we don't know who we are as humans? And so Gen Z are really going to have to think very, very differently about who they are. Number one, they're going to have to be way more intentional than they are. But number two, and this actually AI comes back in here, because I think AI in a strange way is going to help them. What I mean by that is right now, Gen Z are being hit by a lack of opportunity within entry-level positions because AI is taking that work. Mm-hmm. Now, is that a problem? Sure. Is it an opportunity? Absolutely. If we think differently. And I think that Gen Z have the opportunity to really start considering how to gain the kind of life experience that they are going to need to know themselves to then pull that into unmistakable identity. And I think they can take the time to really consider. And again, I think industry is going to need to do a much better job than it is right now to help them. What is going to be of significant human value? And how can I get that experience in a way that allows me to articulate it other than on a resume? Because historically, to build middle management, we've looked at somebody's resume and said, are they capable enough? Have they had enough work experience? But you take entry level work away, there is no work experience. And so what do Gen Z need to do? And this is an ever evolving question, to build the skills and the capabilities that they would have normally got within an entry level position in different ways. And how can they prove it so that middle management is still able to be achieved? Because right now, organizations are creating a huge problem for themselves because they're basically deleting all of this entry level work from a human perspective, putting in the machines, but they're still needing middle managers to manage the business, to manage workflows, etc. Where are they coming from if there's no pipeline? It's a really interesting challenge.
Well, in fact, our conversation, you're totally right. It applies to all generations. We have maybe different challenges, but people under 50s have an opportunity, and people on the early moments of work, the Gen Zs, have also an opportunity to change the way they perceive the world. Sometimes there is going to be fears to overcome. And exactly to that point, I wanted to ask you a question. If somebody listening right now is feeling this feeling of burnout, perfectionism, and is afraid of AI, how can he start this repositioning in practical terms, in action, not in the conceptual world, but what actions can he take? Because he's in a deep, dark hole right now.
Yeah, it's again, great question and an important one, because to your point, there is so much fear out there right now and there's not enough help. And that's a lot of the reason why I'm doing the work that I'm doing. I think, anyone in that space, I strongly encourage to start with acceptance, because I think a lot of people are still, they're kind of where the Luddites were at the turn of the century into the Industrial Revolution, where they simply can't accept that AI in the Industrial Revolution, it was just basic machinery. They simply can't accept that machines are going to exist. They are going to change the way that we live. They are going to change our work. They're going to change everything. And I think acceptance takes a really long time for some people, and that's fine. But it is definitely the first thing on the list. Accept that AI is here to stay. Sure, you still have choice within that, how much you use it, etc. But the landscape of how we live, how we work, is fundamentally changing, and there needs to be a baseline acceptance of that. The second thing that I'm encouraging people to explore is permission. And I think giving ourselves permission to think differently and to think in ways that we historically haven't is really, really important. And this is particularly true for perfectionists. So perfectionists, it's black and white. It's all or nothing thinking very often. And it's, they rely on routine, on structure. And when structure is there, they feel safe. And when structure is taken away, they don't. And I think that's a lot of the reasoning why this fear is exacerbated right now, because it's removing structures that we've used for decades, that we've trusted, that we've built a whole identity on. But giving yourself permission to release some of that. And the irony of kind of burnout management, certainly at this stage in the process, is less about what more can you do, and it's more about what less can you do to make room for. And the two are very, very different approaches, right? Because I'm a huge fan of the phrase, let the silence speak. But we never intentionally make room for silence, or we don't do it often enough. But what's born out of silence and the time in which we're kind of really intentionally making discovery in that space is really exciting. If we allow ourselves permission to explore it, and if we accept that we need to and that we have to, because the face of the world as we know it from a working perspective is fundamentally shifting.
I love what you say, Julian. It is incredible that this feeling, fear, is the drive for a lot of mistakes that we do in life. In my case, it was what conducted me to my burnout, this fear of not having an identity outside of work, this fear of believing that I needed that amount of money to be happy or that to make my family happy. So we created these small prisons in our head. But today, it's also fear that creates opportunities for me because I'm afraid of not being the person that I was dreaming of. I'm afraid of being the person that is sad with maybe $500,000 or $1 million in his bank account, but being alone without my family, maybe not having purpose, just making things because on the flow of life and without meaning. And that fear is what makes me every day in the morning to be at 6 o'clock, ready to do things that matters.
Yeah, I love that. And, you know, that's a very healthy way to frame fear because it can be a huge motivator in healthy ways. It doesn't all have to be, you know, stress and burnout, etc. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I can speak to experience here. The older we get, the more we realize that it's not all about work. But that doesn't necessarily release kind of ambition in the way that people think. All it does is it moves it sideways because I think ambition becomes less about, well, what's my title going to be? I have to get to CEO or I have to earn $300,000 a year or I have to, you know, it becomes less about that and it becomes about legacy. It becomes about, well, how am I going to feel on my deathbed? You know, we're all going to be there. I don't want to feel shame. I don't want to feel regret. I don't want to feel like I've wasted my life in any way, shape or form. So that is less, that fear kind of creates extra motivation that when that motivation is poured into work that is intentionally articulated, that's where sustainability comes from. And that's where I think this kind of curiosity, this kind of creation of what I'm calling unmistakable identities is really powerful because it allows us to take the blinkers off. You know, it's like we stop thinking in this one linear way. We're like into this kind of using the metaphor that I used earlier, diving into this swimming pool of opportunity, you know, and wouldn't it be great if actually we are on our deathbed and we're thinking, you know what? I did pretty well, you know, it's like I climbed the ladder, but then I got off the ladder and I dived into the swimming pool and I swam a lot. I discovered new things. I built new things. I found the opportunity. I had a great time with my family. I was surrounded by friends. I did it intentionally, which meant I kept my health, which is super important. Wouldn't it be great if we could all say that in next year's time when we all reach the end as we are always going to get to, right?
Maybe we could even say that we saw England winning the World Cup. Maybe, only maybe.
In my lifetime, yes, and it could well be. I mean, I have everything crossed, including my legs that you can't see right now, for the results to go in my way. I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it? And it's a lovely kind of metaphor for life because, you know, like in England when I was living there, there's always been this, this is our year. You know, we're always very focused on our teams, and the pressure on the England team to succeed has been so great. But it's been really interesting to see kind of different styles of management, you know, over the years. We've had Italians, we've had Englishmen, we're now being led by a German. And, you know, that brings up a different argument of how do we feel about that? But I love his management style because it's about team. It's been less about how can we bring together, you know, 11 amazing individuals to perform on a fundamental basis. And it's more about, no, I need to create the team that performs at that level. Sure, individuals will thrive within it, but I think that is part of why I'm hopeful this time round. Now, whether they get there or not, who knows? But either way, it's lovely to see that evolution.
Now, for someone whose entire identity is wrapped up in being the best performer or the smartest person in the room, which, by the way, both things AI is now better at, how do you help them grieve that identity and build a new one?
Question. Grieving an identity. I think, again, part of it is down to the acceptance and permission element that we spoke about. But I think the grieving of an identity is a very personal journey. And it's something that I've been through on several occasions, actually, but none more so than when I was forced to leave my time as a performer. As I've already said, I was in the top 1%, very, very high level, and I had to give it all up. And what I discovered really through the process, people go, I haven't played the piano for years. I haven't played drums for years. I haven't been involved in professional music now for 7, 8 years. And people go, do you miss it? And I say, I miss everything that it afforded me. And I miss everything that I was within it. And the two are quite obvious distinctions, but I think important to make, because if you're faced with having to change or shift your perception of your own identity, I think removal, and again, we've spoken about this already, it's less about what more can I do, and it's about taking away. It's the whole Michelangelo situation, right? That statue was created because he had a vision in his head about what it looked like. He didn't chip away and find it. He released all of the marble to create this wonderful statue. Same thing. If you are a CEO, if you are in C-suite and you've recognized that you are in a place where it's like, okay, I can't do this anymore. I don't want to do this anymore. Take away the obvious, take away the job title, take away the money, take away the prestige, take your ego out of the situation and really get to the root of why that job was so important to you. And really uncovering and getting into sometimes very uncomfortable areas with that questioning is incredibly important, because what you're going to find, I've worked with people who have basically come out of that form of exercise and gone, oh my God, I've been doing this for 25, 30 years and I actually didn't really want to do it. It's because I thought I should do it, or my bank balance needed me to do it. I've also worked with clients where the why has been incredibly strong. And, let's say, for example, that they're the CEO of an environmental agency because their personal values are deeply connected with what they were doing. So it's less about the title and it's more about the why and what that really means. So it's coming down to values. What do I really value? And let that be the first building block in the next identity, because there's every chance that when you build it from why, it's going to last longer. It's going to matter more to you. And it's going to speak very much to what we just spoke about when it comes to legacy and bigger life questions later on. Because you're able to say, you know what, I did work that I deeply cared about, that I was really proud of because it meant something to me. It wasn't just about the money or the title, the prestige or the ego or the, everything that goes along with those high-powered positions. So that's where I always encourage people to start. I think that's a really valuable place.
Julian, thank you very much for the time that you have spent with us in the Growth Hacking Culture podcast. I would like to ask you, so if people have questions about identity, two parts for the question. One, what is the first thing that they need to read about you out of the books that you have written? Secondly, how they can reach you out just to chit chat and get to know you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, everything's found at julianreeve.com. There you can download the Human Capability Indicator, which speaks to the unmistakable identity that I've created, and kind of gives you a very clear idea of how you can move forward with the 3 pillars: identity, creativity, and judgment. You can also get into burnout there from a personal perspective, also from an organizational perspective. Some good diagnostic tools available. Yeah, I think I'm always, in terms of how people can find out about me, I've always been historically very, very open in interviews like this about my experience. It's really important that people find hope, find value out of, everything that I've learned with burnout in particular. So, Google will undoubtedly help you when you're researching Julian Reeve and who I am. From a book's perspective, I wrote a kid's book called Captain Perfection and the Secret of Self-Compassion, which has helped kids a lot, which I'm really proud of. And that's built on my TEDx talk. I forget the title, but perfectionism is the subject, and how self-compassion can regulate it and how it's a superpower. So yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure to be here.
Thank you to you, Julian. Thank you.